Well, I function basically as Roland's creative partner, and we, in essence, gave birth to the concept. We prepared the film together, shot the film together, and have been in post together. It's a very good collaboration. I've been with a partner in his company, Centropolis, for about 6 years now. It's basically just how we work. But one thing you have to realize is that when you make a film, if you want to make a good film, you have to make 3 good films. You have to write a good film, but then you have to shoot a good film, and then you have to edit a good film. And these are almost like making 3 separate movies. What makes a good script is not necessarily what makes a good shoot. So sometimes a scene that works one way at one stage evolves in the next stage and finally has to become something different. In the case of 8000 BC, we liked the idea originally, as we were writing the project, of going through the chronology of the evolution of how our story unfolded. But by the time we got to the editing stage, we realized we wanted the movie to begin with the discovery of the Stargate, meeting James Spader's character, meeting Kurt Russell's character, and having these 3 elements come together. The only element that didn't come together in that was the 8000 BC. We didn't really deal with the information found in that until much later in the film, so we decided to push it to a flashback into the middle of the film, where there'd be a closer cause and effect of what you see and how it affects the storyline. Well, actually, 1928 came up because Roland and I were watching a documentary on a woman who was an Egyptologist who'd spent her life in the Valley of the Kings. And she'd been there since she was a young girl, and she actually died there as a very old woman. She'd spent her life trying to learn and study this certain area in Egypt. And we fell so in love with her as a character in real life that we decided that we'd like to have that same kind of feeling. So the opening is at the Giza Plateau, which was at roughly the turn of the century where most activity was happening there. And we follow one girl who discovers something with her father and spends the rest of her life waiting to see it come to fruition, which is where the movie takes place. It's so hard to hear, when you tell me that you've seen The Dove. It's like saying, yeah, we saw your dirty underwear. Oh, man, it's going to be cleaned, it's going to be much better, you're going to like it. There'll be music, there'll be sound, it'll be fabulous. As a brown-skinned American, it was very important for me that when we were going to make this movie, it wasn't going to be something where the white man comes and frees all the brown-skinned people. So what we decided on very early was that knowledge is the ultimate power. Our villain rules through mythology, not so much through his weaponry. And our hero doesn't single-handedly rescue people by killing bad guys. He liberates them by bringing information. Knowledge that was withheld from them, and then the people act on their own. And the sequence you're describing is something that takes place immediately after they've gotten information about people they've worshipped for 10,000 years, only to discover that they're false gods. We wanted to show these people changing, and how they change affects how our hero changes, instead of the other way around. It's part of why I don't think I would ever act in a scene I wrote, which is the whole beauty is that a writer has an experience at a typewriter or a computer, and then an actor has a totally different experience. The greatest joy of the movie is watching an actor take something that you brought up to a 2, and then take it to a 9, and then in editing you pump it to the 10. It's the surprises that make it fun. Very rarely is it that they don't get the way you intended it, especially our actors. I think the most fun of the movie is not even our giant special effects or casts of thousands or huge sets. It's actually very little moments that James and Kirk play.
For instance?
For instance, the way in the script, the whole joke was James goes to eat the food, and it's really disgusting looking. He eats it, there's a long pause, everybody's waiting to see what he says, and he goes, tastes like chicken. All right, it's kind of an old joke, I threw it in. But James has to take it a step further. He looks at the guy. Obviously, the guy doesn't understand what he's saying when he says chicken, so he starts barking like a chicken. Like, bark, bark, bark. Well, this became a terrific moment. So later, in another scene, when they're trying to find James's character, and Kurt Russell can't communicate to the kids, one of the kids looks up and starts barking like a chicken, and Kurt goes, yeah, that's it, that's the guy, Chicken Man. That's not in the script, it just evolved on the set. That's the whole fun. It's an interesting question of which I have a very specific answer, and I would never say publicly, because the whole fun is hoping that they'll find that.
Okay.
And I would never want to tell that. There is an actual lovely subversive message we have buried deep in here that I hope people find. Well, I hope, though, that when people see this film, that they're turned on to the whole Egypt angle of the film. Mm-hmm. I don't expect people to run out and buy every Von Daniken or Zachariah Sitchin book and say, well, that's the gospel. But I would love for people to look again, to question it, to reevaluate everything we know. And maybe we come up with the exact same conclusion. But isn't that the fun of it? This is one of the last remaining mysteries on our planet. And it's so easy for us to take for granted, this is the history, this is how it was. But you know, things pop up that make you question it, that make you say, well, wait a minute. And that was the whole premise of this movie. We said, what if? Let's just take one giant what if and see what happens. Well, we want this movie to harken back to a kind of science fiction that hasn't been done too much lately. It's actually more to a kind of storytelling that someone like Edgar Rice Burroughs would do, or like novels like Princess of Mars. A real fantastic journey, but not done tongue-in-cheek. That was like the important thing. How would you do Flash Gordon if you didn't make fun of it?
Right.
How can you do a loving portrayal of this type of science fiction? So that's why the Egypt angle works hand-in-hand with the science fiction angle here. Because this film was not made cynically. It wasn't like we sat down and said, wow, what a commercial concept, we're going to make a lot of dough. In fact, we know how risky this movie is. We know how difficult the concepts are that we're going after. We don't educate the people who watch this movie what the histories are of the theories of ancient Egypt. We're assuming you already know that. What we want to do is do a movie really from the heart, a movie we wanted to see, something that hasn't been done in a long time, an epic film, like the Cecil B. DeMille type classics, you know, huge sets, casts of thousands. Well, actually, Charlton Heston is partly responsible for this movie.
Get out.
Only in this sense. Roland and I had been witnessing this kind of revival, this retrospective of ancient Egyptian films, or epic films. And Charlton Heston was asked to comment on it, and he said it's very important to do these retrospectives because these kind of films can never be made again. They're simply too expensive. And that was like, you know, throwing down the gauntlet. Roland and I said, all right, well, let's see if we could do it. So we put the package together. We did artwork for it. We wrote the script 5 years ago. We put this whole proposal together, and we took it to each student and said, we want to recreate the epic. And most people in town were interested in doing it. They just simply didn't believe it could be done for the budget we said. They said, you're talking about a $150 million picture. You're talking about a movie that's just not going to make any sense to do. And we said we thought we could do it for a third of that price. And we did. This movie came in on time and on budget, and all the money is on the screen. No one's going to look at this movie and say, geez, where'd they spend the dough? Well, I think the similarity is interesting because the film has a very unusual structure. We didn't go for the Joel Silver whammo chart of every 10 minutes another big sequence. This film is really much more, Roland used to describe it as an onion. You peel off one level, you get to the next, and then you peel off another. You want to slowly let this thing unravel until finally you're left with the problems that you have to deal with. And this is really unusual in a movie to do it that way. Normally you bring in your villain in the first 10 minutes and interactive and you set up. We go for much slower pace, much more, let one mystery evolve into the next. And if it works, hopefully it's a brand new experience, which is, I think, part of the appeal of the CDs. People are sitting down, like when I sat down with Mist last night, I had no idea what I'm supposed to do. And that was like fun. And I think what it does is it says, we don't think you're idiots. We think you can figure this out. We think you're going to have more fun getting involved and putting your brain to work rather than just sitting back and saying, okay, blow me away. And I think that's going to make for a very interesting next generation of people. I'm 32 years old, and I'm part of the generation that spent 4 hours a day just watching reruns, sitting there as a vegetable. People complain about video games now, but you know what? I'd rather have my children interacting with what they're looking at than just sitting there and being entertained. How will it affect films? I don't know, but I know it will. It will affect everything. In the middle of a sequence where we're supposed to have thousands of extras throwing their fists and cheering, we suddenly got the wave. I don't think it'll play.